Democracies are not all the same. We don't agree on everything, all of us in this meeting today. But the choices we make together are going to define, in my view, the course of our shared future for generations to come. And as a global community for democracy, we have to stand up for the values that unite us. We have to stand for justice and the rule of law, for free speech, free assembly, a free press, freedom of religion, and for all the inherent human rights of every individual.
U.S. President Joe Biden hosting more than 100 world leaders at a two-day summit for democracy, warning that global freedoms are under threat by autocrats. For this week's Asian Insider segment, we're joined by U.S. Bureau Chief Nirmal Ghosh. So, Nirmal, what was the main feature on the first day of the summit? And when President Biden says the U.S. is going to lead by example, how does he intend to do that?
Yes, well, media focus was a big part of the agenda today. It was pointed out that 23 journalists have been killed globally so far this year just for doing their jobs. The most recent one, as we know, was a Filipino journalist who was killed in his home while he was sitting watching TV with his wife, and that happened just this week. Ironically, around the same time as Maria Ressa, the Filipina journalist, was on her way to Oslo to receive her Nobel Peace Prize. So President Biden came out quite strongly, and I quote, he said, "A free and independent media is a bedrock of democracy, and the US is committing critical seed money to sustain independent media around the world. This includes a new defamation defense fund for journalists." Now, as to the US leading by example, that is a challenge. So far, the agenda has somewhat stalled. Voting rights legislation has been rolled back in some states. The Biden administration wants to extend voting rights, but that legislation is not going anywhere. There are also two separate probes of the former President Donald Trump over the nature of his involvement in the January 6th insurrection, and also essentially a corruption probe into his organization. Corruption is also a key element of this democracy summit, a key agenda point. The challenge is particularly acute in America because the idea has been planted by former President Trump that the 2020 election was stolen, and many of his supporters believe it. We saw what happened on January 6th when his supporters attacked the Capitol. That was a wake-up moment, and passions are not any lower. And in fact, the Democrats seem set to lose control of both the House and the Senate in the midterms about 11 months from now, and that will make any legislation to counter voting restrictions, to counter gerrymandering of electoral districts, very difficult. And that is not to speak of the larger problems. Many scholars say that American democracy is plagued by an outdated two-party system and the electoral college system. We saw that Donald Trump came to power in 2016, losing the popular vote but winning the electoral college. And another issue is the vast income disparity in the United States, which President Biden is very cognizant of, but that is seen as a left-wing agenda, and that is another problem. So the US is definitely in a bind at home in terms of its credibility, the credibility of its own democracy, and these problems are not going to be solved very quickly.
Well, Nirmal, as you know, like China and Russia, Singapore was not invited to the summit. Well, let's take a listen at this exchange yesterday between Ambassador at Large Tommy Koh and U.S. Embassy Deputy Chief of Mission Rafiq Mansour at an event organized by the Straits Times.
I think you have not answered her question. No. Why did President Biden not invite Singapore to the summit of democracy? That's her question.
Oh, was that your question?
Yes, that's her question.
He read my mind.
Okay.
Yeah.
The answer is very simple. There are a limited number of countries, and it does not reflect on the depth and the breadth of the relationship and the partnership that we have with Singapore. We have a lot to learn from Singapore.
That's a non-answer. Come on, let's be truthful, no? The truth is that, and I think Hengji Bilhari will confirm this, the Democratic Party had never accepted Singapore as a democracy. When President Clinton hosted this equivalent summit, he also didn't invite Singapore to the summit.
Right, so what do you make of this, Nirmal? Have officials in Washington given a reason for not inviting Singapore to the summit?
Well, I spoke with Azra Zia, who's Under-Secretary of State for Civilian Security, Democracy and Human Rights, and I asked her about the fact that Singapore and other countries like Bangladesh, Sri Lanka and Bhutan are not at this summit. And what she said was, and I quote here, "Our goal was to be as inclusive as possible within logistical constraints. We are going to continue engaging with some participants, but also other governments around the world to address democratic backsliding, to promote respect for human rights, to defend against corruption, both at home and abroad, whether that work occurs within or outside the summit framework." And separately, what we are hearing is that the basic strategic calculus does not change if a country is not at this summit. The US-Singapore relationship, for example, is very broad-based, and Singapore being not at this summit will not change that relationship to any significant degree.
US Bureau Chief there, Nirmal Ghosh. The full video with Ambassador-at-Large Tommy Koh's remarks is available on the Straits Times' YouTube page. He was speaking at the launch of a Straits Times press book on the US through a Singapore perspective.